like an extension of us. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not ashamed to have you a part of my family in this regard. You've come from a long line of great men, your father, your grandfathers, your great-grandfathers, and you give them honor. They have nothing to be ashamed of for the progress that you have made, for the man that you are becoming, for the man that you are. You're very talented. You've got a heart for God, and you have borne the burden of being a preacher's kid quite well. You know that saying about preacher's kids. They're just awful, hideous creatures. No, not at all. Dawson has always been sensitive and kind. Perhaps the only bad thing I can say about Dawson is that when he comes to your house, no snack is safe. He will find them. We can hide them in the cupboards, but he'll still get them, and he'll eat them all. And not just one, not two, eat them all. I'm not going to tell you where my hiding spot is, buddy. Dawson, this evening, we give honor to you. Congratulations. Brighton makes me smile. You know, I remember back to when I first came to KCA, and Brighton and Dawson were practically inseparable, and they were always sitting next to each other. And I'm not entirely for certain who started it, but I believe it was Brighton who might have been the first to come up with this crazy sock idea. And it's been the scourge of KCA almost every year. It's the crazy socks. Do you have crazy socks on now? Yes, you do. All right. That makes sense. But at every turn, Brighton was quite naturally expressing his creative mind. It practically oozed from him in everything that he did. It was creative in nature. And I don't want to make him out to be some artsy person, but creativity has a variety of ways of expressing themselves and expressing itself in our life. And you know what? In an environment like KCA, you got to express it through the socks, apparently. You know, let it out, buddy. You know, proud of your socks. But Brighton has always been a very gentle, kind, always easygoing person. It was genuinely moving for me when Brighton joined the basketball team this year. Brighton hadn't previously played and previously had not wanted to play, but the basketball team needed players, and Brighton, in his senior year, stepped up. And it not only just stepped up, but when the moment that he scored, it was the greatest moment that I had seen in a long time. It was so moving to watch somebody actually do well. You know, I remember my son, it took him, well, the first time he played basketball here, it took him games upon games upon games before he actually scored. But with Brighton, it was natural. He took to the big man position well, and he did great for only being the first year. He was such a part of the team that he even twisted his ankle like the rest of the team. Way to go, buddy. Brighton, there is a world of opportunity waiting for creative people to make it happen. And you're one of those people that can make it happen. The future is bright for you. I want to tell you to let God's gift to you, your gentle and kind spirit, let that gift lead you as you navigate what lies ahead. Tonight I give you honor, Brighton. Let's give him a hand clap. At this time, if you would stand to your feet as I welcome to this pulpit the president of our school and the director of King's Temple, Reverend Damon McGee.
Thank you. You can be seated. Thank you, Brother Rippey, and to all of our staff. KCA is so blessed to have so many great staff members, and they do it for ministry. I promise you they do not do it for money. And the staff said amen. I think they were too afraid to say anything right there. But I give all of these students honor tonight. This is an incredible, incredible group of students up here tonight. Dawson, Brighton, Cammie, we're so proud of each and every one of you. And I realize I am under no pretense that you're even going to remember anything I say tonight, because I got to thinking today what was said at my graduation ceremony, and I couldn't remember. Then I tried to think who spoke at my graduation ceremony, and I couldn't remember. So, Dawson, I hope you at least remember who spoke at your graduation ceremony. So I'm under no pretense. However, I do want to leave you with a few words. And really, when I began to think about what I would say tonight, because I can honestly say that I love this group of students. Well, I was going to say like they were on my own children, but one of you is my own child. But the other two, Brighton, you're kind of like an extension just because of your connection to Dawson. And Dawson may or may not be really jealous of your garage, by the way. He came home and talked about how cool your garage was, and actually wanted us to close in our garage and make our garage like yours. We're not doing that, but thank you for the pressure that was applied. Thank you. And Cammie, I don't even know what to say other than you're just an absolute joy to be around. You're an absolute sweetheart. I've never been around you when she wasn't incredibly respectful and kind. And I know, Mom and Dad, that does not happen by accident. So I give all of our parents honor tonight. You've raised incredible children. But I begin to think, what would I want someone to tell me? And what I really began to think about is what I wish someone would have told me years ago. So I want to just leave you with a couple of principles tonight that hopefully you can take with you that I wish maybe I would have paid more attention to as a young man in your position. The first principle I think that you could benefit from is do not despise the desert seasons in your life. Don't despise those. We can look to the example of the Apostle Paul. When he was converted, when he came to the Lord in Galatians, it says, "Neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia and returned again into Damascus." After Paul was delivered from his blindness, after he met the Lord on the way to Damascus, the Lord sent him to the regions of Arabia. Arabia only means one thing. It means the desert. Paul was sent to the desert. The desert often becomes the spiritual boot camp for a man's soul. It's in the desert that a work in the Spirit will occur if we allow it. Desert seasons often are very slow, seemingly unproductive seasons of our life. When we get discouraged, the desert's very dry, it's very harsh, it's a very bitter place. But the desert became the place where Paul found preparation, consecration, and healing. And for those 3 long years that Paul was hidden in the desert, he found his greatest growth in the kingdom. And if each and every one of you can learn to grow in the middle of your desert place, I think you're going to be all right in life. See, the Bible is full of men who faced desert seasons in their life. There was Elijah, there was Job, there was Jacob, there was Abraham, there was David, just to name a few. Even Peter, who was in a desert of failure. All of these men used this season of a desert to grow in the Lord. And so if I could leave you with that first principle, do not despise anything that draws you closer to God. There are no ideal situations in life. It's only how you respond. And I leave you with this example. If you take a simple bar of steel, it's probably worth around $5. But if you take that same bar of steel and you make them into horseshoes, then it becomes double that value. It's worth $10. If that same $5 bar of steel is turned into needles, then it's worth around $350. And yet, if it's made into delicate springs for very expensive timepieces, its value skyrockets to worth more than $250,000. The same bar of steel is made more valuable by being cut to its proper size, passed through the blast furnace time after time after time, hammered and manipulated, beaten and pounded, finished and polished until it's ready for its delicate task. Don't despise the beating from time to time. It's what's going to make you valuable in the kingdom of God. The second thing is I would tell you is don't be afraid to launch out. Don't be afraid to start. Acts 9:20 tells us about Paul again. In the conversion, he said this, and straightway he preached Christ in the synagogue. The second thing we learn from Paul is that he wasn't afraid to start. It says straightway, or immediately he began to preach. There are plenty of people who have great ideas in life, but there are fewer people who act upon those ideas. Don't be afraid to be bold, and don't be afraid to launch out into the deep. There's always a time to analyze, a time to plan, a time to be patient, a time to wait, but there also comes a time when you've just got to give it a shot. The Lord spoke about this in Matthew 11 when he said, the kingdom suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. Ecclesiastes 9 says, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. There's a parable told among the African people which captures this idea very well. It says every morning in Africa, the gazelle awakes and says, today if I'm going to survive, I must outrun the fastest lion. And somewhere in Africa, there's a lion that wakes up and says, I'm going to have to outrun the slowest gazelle, or I'm going to starve to death. And so whether you're a lion or whether you're a gazelle, when the sun comes up, you better be running. And so don't be afraid to act upon your dreams. You have to start. You cannot wait for tomorrow. You can't wait for next week. You can't wait for next year. You've got to start now. And no one can do it for you. You've got to do it for yourself. We've armed you with an education. You have brilliance. You have talents. You have abilities. But only you can act. The third thing that I want to leave you with is let go of resentment. Colossians 3 said it like this: bearing one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. What I wish someone would have told me as an 18-year-old is that unresolved resentment in your life will never leave you. And so you've got to learn to let go of things that would tie you down. Let go of hurts. See, unresolved tension always makes its way to the surface, and it will affect your ability to lead and to influence. Resentment, as defined by Webster, says this: a sense of injury or anger arising from a sense of wrong. It can stifle us and create harm in us and through us. Resentment will spill over into your actions. It'll destroy any good that you wish to accomplish. Here's what I want you to understand. Life is not fair. It's never been fair. It's never going to be fair. And God is not fair. God is just, and God is holy. And so what I would tell you is this today: learn to let go of things. Resentment causes stress, anxiety. It causes uncontrollable feelings of anger. And if they're left unresolved, serious emotional and physical consequences will develop. Resentment doesn't punish anyone but you. And so if I could leave you with just a simple thought, is let go. In the words of our dear friends at Disney, let it go, let it go, let it go. If there's another thing that I could advise you to do when we're coming to this, take your resentments to God. If you read the book of Psalms, you'll discover that this is a valid form of prayer. Admit your hurts and wounds to God, then seek healing and confess it and let it go. Remember, it's not what happens to you that counts. It's what happens in you that counts. And the last thing that I want to leave you with, and I know you won't remember all of these, but maybe if you just remember one: always strive for the prize. 1 Corinthians 9:24 says this: know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize, so run that you may obtain. It was Paul who wrote to the church at Philippi, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. There is a story told of a young man by the name of Monty, who was the son of itinerant horse trainer who would go from stable to stable. He would go from racetrack to racetrack, farm to farm, and ranch to ranch, and he would train horses. And as a result, his high school career was always interrupted by his hectic schedule. And when he was a senior, he was asked to write a paper about what he wanted to do and what he wanted to be when he grew up. Some of you may can relate to that. So that night, I find it interesting that he waited till that night, Dawson, to write a 7-page paper describing his goal. Let's just have a moment of honesty. When did you all write your speeches? When did you write yours? Last night? Yesterday? Today or last night? Today. Thank you. We're in the church. Last night. Okay, today. I was just curious. That night he wrote a 7-page paper describing his goal of someday owning his own horse ranch. He wrote in great detail of this dream. even drew a diagram of a 200-acre ranch showing the location of all the buildings, the stables, and the track that surrounded it. Then he drew a very detailed floor plan for a 4,000 square foot house that would sit on this 200-acre ranch. And he put a great deal of his heart into this project. And the next day he handed it to his teacher. And 2 days later he got the paper back from his teacher, and it had a F written in bright red ink. And it simply said, "Come see me." And so the boy with the dream went to see his teacher after class and said, why did I receive an F? And the teacher said, "This is an unrealistic dream for a young boy like you. Monty, you don't have any money. You come from a very poor family. You have no resources. Owning a horse ranch requires a lot of money. You have to buy the land. You have to pay for the breeding stock. Later, you have to pay very expensive and exorbitant stud fees. There's no way that you could ever do that." And then she handed the paper back to him and said, "If you'll rewrite this paper with a more realistic goal, I will reconsider your grade." So Monty went home and he thought about it very long and hard, and he asked his father what he should do. And his father said, "Son, you have to make up your own mind on this. However, I think it's a very important decision for you." So after thinking about it and sitting for a week, the boy turned in his paper, making no changes at all, and he handed it to his teacher and said, "You can keep the F, and I'll keep my dream." And so what you got to make up in your mind is, there's always going to be critics. There's always going to be people that tell you you can't do something, but you got to keep your eye on the prize. Have a dream, have a goal, and go after it with everything that you have. The boy with a dream became a man, and his dream became reality, because a few years ago, Monty told the story in the living room of his 4,000 square foot home in the middle of his 200-acre horse ranch. And the paper that he wrote had been framed and hung over the mantel of his fireplace. He related that 2 summers ago, that same school teacher brought 30 kids to camp out on the ranch. And when the teacher was leaving, he told Monty, "In years past, I've been somewhat of a dream stealer. During those years, I took kids' dreams. Fortunately, you did not give up on yours. Do not let anybody steal your dreams." So the question is, what is your dream? I would just say to each of you, the last thing that I'll say is, always prepare for where you're going, not where you are. There have been so many times as a pastor, I'm not required to wear a suit, but I do wear a suit because it fits the title. And so there have been times when I have recently, the most recent thought comes to mind is I was on the way to a funeral and realized that my wife, dear, sweet, precious wife, had reminded me to take out the trash that I'd forgot to do about 5 times before. And so while dressed in my suit, I loaded the trash. Actually, I think I had Tristan load the trash. Thank you, Tristan. And Tristan, I'm sorry, your brother didn't even mention you in your speech. That's just cold-blooded. But I love you and want you to know our family supports you. And hopefully one day you'll be here and you can leave him out. Anyway, so I go drive to the local trash site by our home, and I get out and I'm wearing a suit. And very obviously the attendant there looks at me very quizzingly as if to say, you're a little bit overdressed to take out the trash. But I wasn't dressed for where I was. I was dressed for where I was going. I didn't prepare for trash duty. I was prepared to minister at a funeral. And so too many miss their purpose in life because they only prepare for where they are. And so many years ago, as a young minister, I had a desire that I wanted to be a pastor if God so chose. So I began to seek counsel and emulate pastors that God had placed in my life. I had plenty of friends and relatives who could tell me what it took to be a pastor, but I kind of noticed that none of them had ever been one. So therefore, I had to go find somebody that had been one and seek their counsel and advice. And so therefore, while I was just a Sunday school teacher, I wanted to prepare myself to pastor one day. And so you've got to learn what your goal is and what you want to do, and you got to prepare before you get there. Because there's nothing wrong with being prepared and not having a position, but what's really a tragedy is having a position that you're not prepared for. And so each of you today need to learn how to prepare yourself. I'll never forget when I first started my sales career in this journey of life, and I had a sales manager that taught me something that I'll never forget. He came in my office one day and he said, McGee, how much money do you want to make? And it kind of caught me off guard. I didn't know if I was supposed to say low and sound humble or say something high and sound really bold. So I just kind of shot out there and said, $100,000. That's what I want to make, sir. And so he looked at me and he says, okay, if you want to make $100,000, that's possible with this job. And it was. There were men that worked for the same company, made much more money. And they were very busy men. And so he said, he broke it down. He got his pencil out and he began to write on my desk. He said, okay, $100,000 is roughly $1,900 a week, give or take a few dollars. He said, if you take that $1,900 down and you break it down to 50 hours a week, which is the minimum you need to work here to be successful. He said, if you take that down, that's about $38 an hour. $38 to $39 an hour. And he said, son, are you working right now? What you're doing worth $38 an hour? He said, what are you doing with your time every day? He said, every time you go to the coffee pot, every time you surf on the web, you're wasting valuable resources. He says, because if you wouldn't pay yourself $38 an hour for what you're doing every minute of the day, you're not worth $38 an hour. And it's a principle that I've never forgot, is I wanted to earn at a high level, so I had to perform at a high level. And so I began to work or attempt to work at a level of excellence. And others laughed, called me a do-gooder, but the truth is they weren't making a lot of money and complained about what they were doing, but they were only working at about a $10 hour clip. And then guess what? That's what they earned. So there are going to be people that will laugh at you, that will mock you, that will ridicule you, that will try to keep you confined to the resources in which they have. But I want you to understand anything is possible through Jesus Christ. So whatever you want to do, you set your mind to it. And through Jesus Christ, you can do it. And so those are just some simple principles that I want to leave you with here today. And I want you to know all of these people that are gathered here today, they're behind you, they're supporting you, and they're rooting for you. And I would close for this. Do not settle in life. You can do great things through Jesus Christ. Can we give them a great round of applause?
Seniors, please rise. Brother McGee, these students have completed the requirements for graduating from high school as prescribed by the state of Louisiana and the staff of Kingston Christian Academy. I implore you to confer on them the diplomas earned.
I confer upon these students the diplomas that are earned.
Dawson Lewis McGee. Brighton Gage Dykes. Cameron Michelle Hunter. If you would please rise. Graduates, you may now move your tassel from the right to the left. It is my honor to present to you the 2018 graduating class of Kingston Christian Academy.